The woman you fired, humiliated, and erased from your boardroom just became your boss's fiancé, Damon. The words didn't just echo, they exploded. Gasps rippled across the crowd. A champagne glass shattered near the buffet. The microphone hadn't glitched. The voice hadn't trembled. Every head on the yacht turned at once. And there she was, Layla Castillo, wrapped in shadowy silk. Diamond-lit fingers laced with power. Expression unreadable. The woman they'd all forgotten. The secretary they'd called disposable. The girl with nothing to offer, except everything they underestimated. Now, she walked beside Julian Blackthorne, the billionaire who didn't share headlines, emotions, or control. Until tonight. He stood at the bow of the yacht, fingers curled possessively around Layla's waist, and announced their engagement without breaking eye contact with Damon Hale, CEO of Hale & Rowe. The man who once fired her with a 2-line email and wouldn't even meet her eyes when she begged for an explanation. Now, he couldn't look away. He couldn't breathe. Because she wasn't supposed to survive the fall. She wasn't supposed to come back. And she sure as hell wasn't supposed to come back with the one man who could destroy him. Layla tilted her head, just enough to show off the ring. The diamond caught the spotlight. Her smile didn't. Because this wasn't revenge. It was war in heels. The diamond wasn't subtle. It wasn't meant to be. It was a 6-carat radiant cut sparkler that gleamed like it had been pulled straight from the sun, and it rested proudly on Layla's left hand. Not hidden, not hesitant, front and center. Right where Julian Blackthorne wanted it to be. The crowd didn't breathe. Phones went up like a synchronized wave, flashes firing from every angle. Layla let them stare. She didn't shrink. She didn't blink. She didn't even reach for Julian's hand like a blushing bride might. She stood there like she owned the ocean they were floating on. Somewhere to her left, a woman choked on her drink. Someone else whispered, "That's Damon Hale's ex-secretary." A third voice added, "That's not a secretary anymore." Julian raised his glass. To power, partnership, and the future Mrs. Blackthorne. A roar of polite applause followed, but Damon didn't clap. He couldn't. Because from where he stood 20 feet away, still frozen in place, he saw what no one else did. He saw the storm in Layla's eyes. He saw the precision in her posture. He saw the challenge. Because that ring on her finger wasn't just a promise. It was a warning, a calculated announcement, a glittering symbol that screamed, "You didn't just lose me. You underestimated me." And the worst part, she wasn't looking at Julian. She was looking at him. Right? At him. Damon Hale didn't move. Not when the cameras turned. Not when the applause rippled through the air like mockery. Not even when Layla's eyes locked onto his like a sniper sight. He stood frozen at the edge of the upper deck, glass in hand, the ice inside long melted, just like his carefully guarded composure. His jaw clenched so tight it ticked. A storm brewed beneath his perfectly tailored suit. But outside, not a crack, only his eyes betrayed him. Because he wasn't looking at Julian. He wasn't looking at the crowd. He was looking at the woman who used to refill his coffee, organize his life, and once, only once, almost made him forget who he was. He remembered that night. The way her hand lingered on the file. The way she didn't flinch when he got too close. The way her breath hitched when he said her name like it mattered. He remembered nearly kissing her. And he remembered walking away. Because Damon Hale didn't get involved with assistants. Especially not ones who looked at him like he could be more than numbers and ice. Especially not her. She was supposed to disappear quietly. Grieve the humiliation. Move on. She wasn't supposed to walk back into his world wearing the crown he denied her. She wasn't supposed to stand next to Julian. His mentor, his boss, his threat, not her, not like this. The world blurred around him as Layla raised her glass, her smile still painted in war paint. For a split second, the years between them evaporated, and all Damon saw was the girl who once looked at him like he was worth saving. And now, she looked like she'd come to collect what was owed. Julian tapped his glass with a silver ring, just once. The sound was crisp, commanding. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Forks paused halfway to lips. The music faded out without cue. Thank you all for joining us tonight, Julian said, his voice smooth, magnetic, dangerously calm. This isn't just a celebration of power, innovation, or Blackthorn Capital's expansion. He paused. His arm tightened around Layla's waist. It's a celebration of something far rarer in our world. He turned toward her. The crowd collectively inhaled. I've found someone who doesn't just challenge me, but redefines what power means. Layla's eyes didn't flicker. Her smile didn't grow. She stood there like a monument, unmoving, timeless. Julian reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, then flipped it open midair for the press to see. She said yes. Silence cracked into chaos. Gasps. Cheers. Camera flashes exploding like fireworks. Reporters surged forward. Socialites clutched their pearls. The COO of Hale & Rowe nearly dropped her champagne flute. But Damon? He didn't move. His heart pounded in his throat. His hand curled into a fist so tight the veins stood out against his skin. Layla turned toward Julian with perfect precision and placed her left hand inside his. She let the light hit the ring just right. Let the photographers capture her new title, fiancé to the man who controlled everything, including Damon's future. Her lips parted, and finally she spoke. "Thank you, Julian," she said, her voice steady, deliberate. "It's an honor to stand beside someone who sees what others overlooked." She didn't say Damon's name. She didn't have to. Every word was a blade, and he knew exactly where they landed. The applause faded like static. Julian was pulled into conversation by shareholders and press, handshakes flying, cameras clicking. But Layla, she didn't move. Not toward the crowd. Not toward Julian. She turned slowly and walked toward the upper deck. Toward him. Damon didn't blink. Didn't breathe. Not until she was close enough for him to smell her perfume. Something soft. Clean. But edged with smoke. "Quite a surprise," he said, his voice low, steady. Too steady. Layla tilted her head. "Is it?" Her tone was polite. Weaponized. Deadlier than any scream could have been. Damon stepped in, close enough that no one else could hear, close enough to remember every inch of her he'd tried to forget. The air between them was a minefield. He leaned in, just enough to make her spine straighten, and then he whispered it. "What game are you playing, Layla?" Her eyes flickered, only for a heartbeat. Then her smile returned, cruel and slow. She didn't answer. She turned and walked away, back toward Julian. Toward the crowd. Toward the cameras. And Damon, he was left standing alone, in a sea of power, press tuxedos and billion-dollar contracts. Completely. Utterly. Powerless. No one noticed her. Not until something went wrong. If the printer jammed, schlaff if the coffee order got messed up, if the boardroom reports didn't arrive exactly on time. But Layla Castillo? She noticed everything. Tucked in a sleek corner of the 29th floor of Hale & Rowe's Manhattan headquarters, Layla moved like a ghost among titans. Her desk was pristine. Her posture perfect. Her eyes, sharp enough to slice through the egos that brushed past her without a second glance. She didn't come from money. She came from a 2-bedroom apartment in Queens, shared with a diabetic little brother and a mother who never stopped working. Her shoes were clean but worn. Her blouses always pressed, even if they were from clearance racks. No Harvard. No connections. Just raw intellect, focus, and discipline so fierce it could have been mistaken for obsession. Layla wasn't loud. She didn't gossip. She didn't flirt or flatter. She solved problems. Executive assistants came and went. But Layla? She remembered birthdays, anticipated breakdowns, had replacement flights booked before anyone realized one was canceled. She didn't just survive under pressure, she thrived in it. But while she stapled packets and scheduled meetings, she was watching. Every negotiation, every outburst, every silence in the elevator that meant more than words. Because Layla didn't just want a paycheck. She wanted to understand power. And no one embodied power like Damon Hale. Damon Hale didn't believe in second chances. He believed in results, metrics, measurable outcomes. Emotions had no place in his empire. In the boardroom, he was infamous, cold, efficient, unshakable. Every executive under him knew one thing. Damon didn't ask twice, and he didn't apologize. Ever. At 36, he'd climbed higher than most men dared. CEO of Hale & Rose North American Division, the youngest in the firm's history. His name opened doors. His signature closed deals. He didn't smile unless it was calculated. He didn't speak unless it mattered. And he didn't tolerate failure, especially not from those who made excuses. Behind the sleek charcoal suits and designer watches was a man who built his reputation like armor. Ruthless in negotiations, controlled in crisis, and lethal in silence. His stare alone had made vice presidents resign mid-meeting. Whispers followed him everywhere, that he'd dumped a fiancée over email, that he'd fired someone mid-flight, that he never dated women who worked for him but never kept one longer than a quarter. No one dared to get close. Until Layla. She didn't try to charm him, didn't stumble in his presence. She made herself small but never invisible, sharp but never arrogant, and somehow, she made him pause. That terrified him more than he'd ever admit. The room felt 10 degrees colder the moment Damon walked in. Everyone stood. Not out of respect, out of fear. Layla stood too, her notebook in hand, eyes down but ears wide open. "Sit," Damon said sharply, not looking up. They obeyed. He slid a folder across the table. Page 7. There was a beat of silence, then a throat cleared. "We thought we had until next quarter to adjust those metrics." "You thought?" Damon's voice sliced through the air. "You thought a 12% dip in performance was acceptable during a merger quarter?" He didn't yell. He never had to. His tone was lethal enough. "I want resignations by end of day," he said. "If your name's on that chart, you're gone." Gasps. Awkward glances. One exec visibly paled. Layla didn't blink. She had stapled that packet. She knew exactly who was on that chart, but she said nothing. She kept her face still, her hands steady, and yet something inside her twisted, not out of fear, out of realization. This man could destroy someone with a single sentence and never look back. And she had no idea yet how close she'd come to that fate. The second she stepped off the elevator, the air changed. Gone were the marble floors and designer silence of the Hale & Rowe building. Here it smelled like boiled rice and hallway bleach. The walls were thin, the neighbors loud. But this was home, Unit 4C. 4th floor. Same rusted doorknob, same flickering light. Inside, her mother was asleep on the couch, still in her nurse scrubs. Her little brother Mateo lay curled on the twin bed, an oxygen machine humming gently beside him. Layla kicked off her heels, toes aching, and exhaled for the first time all day. She walked to the kitchen, small, barely enough room to turn around, and opened the mail. Hospital bills, more tests, a late payment notice, $8,432 due. She swallowed hard and stuffed them back into the drawer. She'd already called the billing department. Twice. They didn't care that Mateo was only 11. They didn't care that he cried when the needles came. They just wanted their money. Layla poured a glass of water, leaned against the counter, and stared at the ceiling. People at work thought she was quiet because she was shy. They had no idea she was quiet because if she ever screamed, she wouldn't know how to stop. And tonight, she was too tired to scream. She just needed to survive tomorrow. It was past 9 p.m., and the building had emptied into city lights and car horns. Layla remained at her desk, fingers moving over her keyboard like a concert pianist, formatting a report Damon hadn't even requested yet, but would by morning. She didn't hear him approach. "Still here?" Damon's voice broke the silence like a stone through glass. She looked up, startled, but only for a second. "Yes," she replied simply, without flinching. Most assistants would have apologized, explained, tried to impress him. Layla didn't. Damon's gaze lingered. "You don't talk much," he said. "I listen," she answered. Something about her voice, quiet but confident, made him pause. He glanced at her screen, then at the color-coded folders stacked beside her. Predictable, but sharp, like everything else about her. She wasn't just organized, she was intentional. "You've been here, what, 8 months?" he asked. 9, she said, not looking up. He didn't correct himself. Just stood there, hands in his pockets, jaw flexing like he was trying to read a language only she spoke. Layla finally looked up. "Do you need anything else tonight, mister?" Kale? He opened his mouth then closed it. No, he said. That'll be all. But he didn't walk away immediately. And when he finally did, Layla stared after him. Just a little too long. It was nearly midnight when Layla knocked softly on his door. The lights were still on. The air smelled like cold espresso and stress. He didn't look up. Come in. She stepped inside holding a revised projection file. You asked for the updated merger breakdown. His tie was loosened. Jacket off. Shirt sleeves rolled up to the elbows. He looked human. Damon took the file but didn't read it right away. You're the only one who hasn't left. I figured you'd still be here, she replied. His eyes lifted to meet hers. That long, unreadable stare. And then softly, do you ever get tired of cleaning up everyone else's mess? She blinked. Something in his voice cracked. Just a little. She didn't answer. Instead, she walked to the edge of his desk and placed the file down. He stepped around the desk. Closed the distance between them. Too close. Close enough that she could hear his breath shift. See the lines near his eyes. Smell the faint trace of his cologne, sharp, clean, expensive. Layla? It wasn't a command. It wasn't even a question. Just her name. Sash said like it mattered. Their faces were inches apart now. Her lips parted. He leaned in and then stopped. Go home, he said, voice hoarse. She didn't move, neither did he. But whatever that was, it would never be spoken of again. Damon didn't mention that night. Not in meetings. Not in passing. Not even when Layla placed documents inches from the spot where her body had nearly met his. But something had shifted. His gaze lingered too long. His tone softened, barely, but she noticed. And when she left his office, his eyes always followed, like there was something unfinished between them. Because there was. For Layla, it was a fracture in her control. She'd trained herself to be invisible, unreadable, untouchable. Until that moment. Until his voice cracked on her name. She told herself it meant nothing. That it was a moment of weakness for both of them. That the chemistry was a glitch, not a pattern. But late at night, when she returned to the quiet apartment and tiptoed past her mother's snores and Mateo's coughs, she remembered how close they'd been, and wondered what would have happened if he hadn't stopped. For Damon, it was a line he never crossed, but wanted to, and that terrified him. He couldn't afford softness. Not with investors watching. Not with a boardroom full of sharks. Not with someone like Layla, a woman who saw more than she ever said. She was too sharp. Too calm. Too dangerous to let close, because if he let her in, he wouldn't know how to let her go. The photo wasn't scandalous, but it didn't have to be. One candid shot. A flashbulb moment captured at a private charity gala. Damon leaning in close, whispering something no one else could hear. Layla's lips parted in surprise, her eyes locked on his. The intimacy was unmistakable. By morning, it was on 2 gossip blogs. By noon, it was sent anonymously to Hale and Rowe's legal department. By 4, Layla was called into HR. She sat across from a compliance officer she'd never met. The woman didn't make eye contact. This isn't personal, she said. Layla didn't argue. She didn't speak. Her badge was deactivated. Her inbox wiped. Her name removed from the executive assistant roster before she even returned to her desk. Damon didn't come to see her, didn't call, didn't offer a word of explanation. It was as if she'd never existed. She stepped into the elevator, clutching the small box of her belongings, pulse thundering in her ears. The doors closed, and just like that, everything she had built was gone. Because of one moment. One man. One look too long. The email came without a subject line. Just 4 words, HR. Now, 10:15 a.m. Layla stared at it for a moment too long, her fingers hovering above her keyboard like they might shield her from what she already knew. Something was wrong. By the time she reached the 26th floor, her pulse was a silent drumbeat in her throat. The HR lobby was quiet. Too quiet. A woman in a gray pencil skirt opened the glass door. Layla Castillo? She nodded. This way. Inside there were no greetings. No coffee. No time to breathe. The woman sat. Opened a folder. Didn't smile. We're terminating your contract effective immediately. Layla blinked. What? No explanation can be provided due to internal confidentiality policies. Your final check and severance package will be processed through legal. I haven't done anything wrong. The woman didn't flinch. You'll need to clear your desk within the hour. It didn't feel real. A week ago, she was running the floor with precision. Now she was being erased. Security will escort you down, the woman added, and just like that, it was over. She saw him. Right after the meeting, Damon was standing just outside the corner office speaking to someone in legal. His voice was low, unreadable, but when his eyes met hers across the hall, he looked away. Quick, clean, like it was reflex, like she was no longer a person but a problem. Layla froze. For 1 second she hoped he'd speak, offer clarity, maybe even protect her from the humiliation still crawling up her throat. But he turned, walked the other way. And that hurt more than the termination, more than the silence. Because Damon Hale, the man who once almost kissed her, now wouldn't even look her in the eye. The assistant beside him whispered something. He didn't respond, didn't flinch, as if Layla had never existed at all. Security met her at her desk. Said nothing. Just stood there as she packed cardboard box with the life she'd built, one paperclip, one photo, one memory at a time. No goodbye, no thank you, just cold, mechanical silence. She didn't cry, not there. But as she stepped into the elevator and the doors closed, she knew something inside her had just shattered. The badge didn't beep. When she tried to scan out, the light turned red. Access denied. The security guard sighed, then stepped forward and opened the gate manually. She didn't look at him. Couldn't. Her heels clicked once on the marble floor, then again, and then she was outside. The city was cold. The sky had turned steel gray. Rain fell without ceremony, steady, icy, and unrelenting. She had no umbrella, no coat, just a cardboard box against her chest and a silence that rang louder than traffic. People rushed past her, phones in hand, heads down. No one noticed the girl standing in the rain with her life reduced to a box of staplers and heartbreak. She didn't move for a while, not until the cardboard started to soften. Not until her blouse clung to her spine like regret. She walked down the avenue with no plan, no words, and no idea how to explain any of it to her family. She just kept moving, one foot in front of the other, one block at a time, until the tears started falling too, and she couldn't tell where the rain ended and she began. The nurses wouldn't meet her eyes. Room 204, one of them said, voice clipped. You'll have to speak with billing first. Layla's pulse spiked. She dropped her wet box of belongings in the hallway chair and ran. The door to Mateo's room was wide open. Empty bed. Blank monitor. No oxygen machine. No little brother. For a second, the world tilted. She turned to the nurse passing with a clipboard. Where's my brother? Mateo Castillo. He was here this morning. The nurse hesitated. He's been moved. Layla's heart dropped. Why? Is he okay? Billing flagged your account. We can't continue treatment without a deposit. They transferred him to the waiting ward until it's resolved. The waiting ward. She'd seen it before. Crowded, noisy, underfunded. A hallway with curtain dividers. Nowhere for a sick 11-year-old boy who still flinched at IVs. But she stopped. What could she say? She had nothing. No job. No paycheck. No options. Just silence ringing in her ears as she walked to the hallway that now housed her brother. Mateo was curled on a cot, eyes shut. Pale. His blanket was too thin, and suddenly the firing wasn't what broke her. This was. This moment. This injustice. She didn't know what pushed her to the front desk, desperation or fury. I need more time, Layla told the billing officer. Her voice was calm, but her hands trembled. Please. I just lost my job today. The woman behind the glass didn't blink. I'm sorry, but without a minimum deposit, treatment cannot resume. Layla swallowed the scream in her throat. Then I need a payment plan, she said. Anything. Her phone buzzed. She almost didn't check it, but when she did, her breath caught. Bank notification, wire received, $25,000 from Blackthorn Trust Holdings. She stared at the screen, blinked twice. It wasn't a mistake. It was real. The funds had cleared, fully processed, immediate availability. "What is it?" the billing officer asked, eyeing her. Layla slowly turned the screen around. "I want my brother back in his room." The woman hesitated, then nodded and made the call. Layla stepped back, mind racing. She hadn't told anyone at Hale and Rowe about Mateo. Damon didn't know. HR didn't ask. So who sent the money? And why now? She looked down at the sender's name again, and the weight of what it meant hit her like thunder. The rain had stopped, but Layla was still soaked. She stood outside the hospital entrance, staring at the notification on her phone. The number glared back at her like a dare. Blackthorn Trust Holdings. She didn't know anyone there. Not directly. Not personally. But she knew the name. Everyone in finance did. Julian Blackthorn, founder of the most powerful private equity firm on the East Coast. Silent investor in dozens of major acquisitions, including Hale and Rowe. He didn't do small favors. He didn't write sympathy checks. And yet, someone in his inner circle had wired her enough money to keep Mateo in treatment for months. No message, no contact, just power. Delivered. She scrolled through her call logs. No missed numbers, no strange texts. No one else could have known, unless they'd been watching, unless someone had been keeping tabs. A chill ran down her spine. Layla looked up at the city lights flickering above the skyline, cold, sharp, and far away. This wasn't a gift. It was a move. And if it came from Julian Blackthorn, then Damon Hale wasn't the only man watching her fall. Someone else had just placed a bet on her. And she wasn't sure if it was a rescue or the beginning of something worse. Layla vanished, not with headlines, not with scandal, just silence. She deleted her LinkedIn, changed her number, ignored every call from former coworkers who only remembered her after her fall. No one knew where she went, not Hale and Rowe, not Damon. While the corporate world moved on, Layla stepped into the shadows. No job title, no office, no fixed path, just one mission: rebuild. She cashed the wire transfer carefully, splitting it between Mateo's medical bills, rent, and a small sliver for something no one had ever invested in before: herself. She worked night shifts at a small publishing warehouse. Days were spent in front of a cracked laptop, watching lectures on finance, market patterns, mergers and acquisitions. She didn't cry anymore. Didn't rage. She studied. She absorbed. She transformed. Every file she'd once printed for Damon, she now analyzed with a strategist's mind. Every boardroom insult echoed in her mind, not as pain, but fuel. By the time the leaves changed again, Layla Castillo was no longer broken. She was building. Layla's nights became a ritual. Laptops humming. Blue light reflecting off tired eyes. Notebooks stacked beside microwave dinners. She devoured course after course: Yale, Wharton, Columbia, finance boot camps built for Wall Street wolves. She took them all. She didn't just want to understand money. She wanted to control it. By day, she blended in, a nameless intern at a boutique private equity firm tucked in a brownstone on the Upper East Side. She filed due diligence reports, sat silently through pitch decks, took notes no one read. But she listened, watched, absorbed. No one knew her story. No one recognized her face. She'd traded designer heels for flats, sleek buns for loose waves. She scrubbed off the version of herself that Damon Hale had erased. What remained? A weapon in the making. At night, she returned to Mateo, checked his oxygen levels, kissed his forehead. Then she opened her laptop and kept going. No distractions. No social life. No wasted movement. She was sharpening herself. Grit into steel, pain into strategy. Because one day she wouldn't just walk back into that world. She'd own the damn building. The room smelled like old money and polished power. Crystal glasses. Italian suits. Quiet conversations that shaped billion-dollar deals. Layla sat at the very back. Not on the panel. Not on the guest list, just an assistant to the assistant of someone forgettable. But when she spoke, when she corrected a risk projection the presenter had fumbled, everyone looked up, including him. Julian Blackthorn, 62. Silver hair perfectly trimmed, a watch worth more than Layla's rent for the year. But it was his eyes that held her. Not lecherous, not dismissive, calculating, curious. After the meeting, he approached her. Not her boss, not the firm. "You're not supposed to be in this room," he said, sipping his scotch. Layla met his gaze. Neither are half the people who pretend they belong, he smiled. Not many people surprised him. But she did. Tell me, he said, if you had $30 million in 2 months, what would you invest in right now? She didn't blink. She answered him. Bold, exact, unapologetic. Julian said nothing for a moment. Then he chuckled softly, handed her his card, and walked away. But in that moment, something shifted. He'd seen her. Julian didn't wait long. A sleek black car showed up outside Layla's walk-up apartment the following Monday. No explanation, just an address and a note. You owe me lunch, JB. She almost didn't go, but she did. His penthouse office overlooked Central Park. Floor-to-ceiling windows, rare books, abstract paintings that screamed wealth without trying. He poured her espresso himself. No assistant. No interruptions. I've had my eye on you, Julian said simply. Layla arched a brow. Because of what I said in that meeting? No, he said. Because of how you said it. She didn't smile. She wasn't flattered. She waited. You don't posture. You don't bluff. You calculate. That's rare in your generation, he added, studying her like a chessboard. I don't have the luxury to bluff. Good, he said. Then you won't waste my time. Over the next hour, he didn't flirt. He didn't patronize. He asked her questions most men in power never bothered to ask. What did she want? What scared her? What did she believe most people got wrong about ambition? When she answered, he didn't interrupt. And when she left, he didn't stop her. But later that night, he texted one line, next time bring a pitch. The room was smaller this time, but sharper. 5 men, 2 women, all worth more than small nations. Julian didn't announce her. Didn't introduce her. Just nodded once and let her take the floor. Layla stood before them with nothing but a binder and a voice that didn't shake. Her pitch wasn't flashy. It was surgical. She presented a fund built around undervalued tech infrastructure in Latin America, leveraging supply chain weaknesses no one else was watching. 2% of your portfolios, she said, could return 28 within a year. If you move now. Silence. Then questions. Harsh ones. She answered each with quiet confidence. No stumbles, no spin, just data, insight, precision. When she finished, Julian leaned back and sipped his drink. The room voted. Unanimous approval. 5 million to start. 15 if benchmarks were hit. Layla walked out with a signature and a seat at the table, not as an assistant, not as a charity case, as a partner. Later, Julian approached her in the elevator, hands in his pockets. No one's ever walked into that room and won on their first pitch, he said. Layla looked ahead. Then they weren't me. And for the first time since her fall, she believed it. The dominoes fell fast after that. Within months, Layla had 2 more funds under her name, one in real estate tech, another in sustainable logistics. She negotiated term sheets with men twice her age and 4 times her ego, and she won. Not with charm, with numbers. Logic. Strategy that cut through arrogance like a scalpel. They started calling her the girl with the glass-cut voice. Calm, measured, and impossible to ignore. Julian didn't interfere. He watched, occasionally advised, but mostly, he opened doors. She didn't walk through them. She stormed them. She started flying business class, wearing suits tailored in Milan, speaking at panels, always introduced as the unexpected rising star of mid-market funds. But none of it felt fast enough. Not when the face of Damon Hale still flickered behind her eyelids. Not when the memory of that elevator, that silence, that betrayal, still burned like an unfinished scar. So she kept climbing, faster, sharper, colder, until the girl who once cried in the rain outside Hale and Row was a ghost even she barely recognized. Her first invitation arrived in a navy blue envelope sealed with a silver crest. Blackthorn Private Consortium, Winter Summit, Dubai. The next month, a champagne dinner at a castle in the Scottish Highlands, then an island off the Amalfi Coast, each event more exclusive than the last. No press, no photos, just whispers, power plays, and billion-dollar deals. And Layla? She wasn't the intern in borrowed shoes anymore. She held court with venture titans and oil heirs. She translated silence into strategy. And she never let them see her sweat. Julian was always nearby. Never possessive. Always watching. He'd introduce her as the sharpest mind I've seen in 20 years, and no one questioned it, because she delivered, every time. On the balcony of a mansion in Santorini, Julian handed her a flute of champagne and nodded toward a cornered CEO. "He's about to go bankrupt," he whispered. "Bet you can make him beg." She didn't laugh. She smiled once, crossed the terrace, and within 10 minutes had the man pitching her his company. Julian watched her like a chess player watches his queen, with awe, control, and quiet, growing hunger. It started subtly. A second glass poured before she asked, her favorite dessert appearing on the table without a word. The way his gaze lingered half a beat longer than before. Julian Blackthorne never chased, he made the world come to him. But with Layla, he waited. He didn't flirt. He studied. Didn't compliment, he noticed. "Most people want to be seen," he told her over oysters and candlelight. "But you want to be understood." She froze for a second, because he was right, and she hated that he was right. "You've earned your place," he said, "but you haven't allowed yourself to enjoy it." She sipped her wine. Enjoyment is a distraction. His smile was soft, knowing. Not if it's earned. He didn't touch her. Didn't cross the line, but the air between them shifted. And still, Layla held back, because buried beneath every private jet and polished deal sheet was Damon Hale, the man who taught her silence, the man who taught her humiliation, the man who still lived in the shadowed corners of her mind, uninvited, unresolved. So when Julian leaned closer, she smiled and changed the subject. The city glittered beneath them, glass towers reflecting moonlight, the river moving slow and silver beneath the sky. Layla stood on the balcony alone, heels in hand, skin kissed by fog. Julian stepped beside her without a sound. The gala behind them still buzzed, champagne flutes clinking, violins humming. But out here, it was just them. "You were brilliant tonight," he said, his voice lower than usual. She didn't respond. He looked at her profile, the tension in her jaw, the way her chest rose and fell like she was holding back a storm. "Do you ever let yourself rest?" he asked. Layla turned to him, eyes guarded. "Rest is for people who don't have something to prove." Julian stepped closer. "You've already proven it." His hand came to her face, slow, deliberate, and gentle. She didn't move, didn't breathe. His lips met hers, not demanding, not possessive, just sure. And she didn't pull away. For a moment, the world went quiet. The pain, the ambition, the ghosts of Manhattan, all of it faded, until she opened her eyes again and remembered exactly why she'd taught herself to never need anyone. The headline broke mid-morning. Blackthorne Capital eyes full acquisition of Hale & Rowe. Layla's inbox exploded in real time. Alerts, messages, confused congratulations, subtle questions. She said nothing. She just watched the news anchor read Julian's statement, calm, direct, and unapologetic. This move allows Blackthorne Capital to realign underperforming assets, streamline executive leadership, and optimize global synergy. Translation: we're taking over. Heads will roll. Damon Hale's face flashed briefly on screen. File photo. Cold jawline. No comment issued. Layla closed the tab. She already knew the terms. She'd helped draft them. Julian hadn't told her until everything was signed. "I didn't want you to pull your punches," he'd said. She hadn't. Hale & Rowe would be absorbed in 60 days. A full executive review would begin immediately. And she was officially appointed as lead transition advisor. Meaning one thing, she and Damon Hale were going to be trapped in the same rooms for the next 8 weeks. She leaned back in her chair, heart steady. She'd imagined revenge looking more dramatic, more explosive. But this was better. It was slow, icy, and corporate. Exactly how Damon had taught her to play. The first meeting started at 9 a.m. sharp. Layla arrived 5 minutes early, crisp navy suit, zero expression. Damon walked in at 8:59. Their eyes met, neither spoke. Julian sat at the head of the table, flanked by lawyers and analysts. "You two will be leading the operational realignment, starting today." Damon didn't flinch. "I thought Layla was here as an external advisor." Julian didn't blink. "She's not external. She's with me." The room went silent. Layla calmly unzipped her leather folio and slid a transition roadmap onto the table. Color-coded. Brutal. Damon stared at it. You've already outlined cuts? Yes, she replied. Redundancies, outdated roles, inefficiencies. His jaw clenched. You worked here for 2 years. I remember every weakness, she said, voice cool. I was invisible, remember? The air thickened. Julian cleared his throat. Any personal tension between you two will need to wait. This isn't about feelings, it's about performance. Damon's eyes flicked to her once more. Calculating. Cornered. But Layla? She didn't look away. She didn't blink, and for the first time in years, she had more power in that room than he did. The boardroom became a battlefield. Not with shouting or slammed doors. Damon Hale didn't operate that way. No. His war was fought in clipped comments, sideways glances, and the tightening of his jaw every time Layla spoke with authority. She knew exactly what she was doing. She called him Mr. Hale in front of staff. Reviewed his quarterly forecasts with surgical detachment. Suggested reassigning his most loyal VP to a lower division, all while keeping her tone polite and her smile non-existent. He responded with numbers. Precision. Cool rebuttals. But never once did he interrupt her. Not because of respect, because of recognition. She wasn't the assistant he dismissed. She was the woman who now had the room's attention, and his trapped under glass. Outside of meetings, the tension crackled, passing each other in hallways, avoiding, but never really avoiding, eye contact in elevators. One night they reached for the same file in the conference room. Their hands touched. Layla didn't flinch. Damon pulled his hand back like he'd touched fire. Neither of them spoke, but in that silence, every word they never said screamed louder than any fight. And the boardroom wasn't the only place they were unraveling. The building was empty, but Damon stayed behind. He sat in his office, lights dimmed, her transition file open in front of him. Every line was flawless, efficient, cold, just like her. Except it wasn't her. Not the girl who once left coffee on his desk with a sticky note that said, "You skipped lunch again." Not the woman who used to blush when he got too close, but never backed down. This version was polished, unreachable, dangerous. He'd watched her command rooms now. Shut down billionaires with a single glance. She knew the game better than most, because he had trained her without meaning to. And now, she was better at it than he was. He thought the guilt had faded after she was fired, buried under mergers and metrics. But seeing her again like this, it brought it all back. The almost kiss, the photo, the silence when she walked out, and he let her. He didn't just fire her, he broke something. And now she stood across from him with the kind of confidence that didn't beg for revenge. It delivered it. And Damon Hale, for the first time in years, didn't know what move to make next. She wore winter white, no jewelry, no softness, just structure, sharp lines, clean cuts, and presence that silenced the room before she even spoke. Layla stood at the head of the table, clicker in hand, pacing through slides like a surgeon with a scalpel. The redundancies in Division 6 are bleeding resources, she said flatly. And the Hale protocol on legacy contracts is outdated by 2 fiscal years. No one interrupted, not even Damon. She didn't glance his way once. Didn't need to. The entire table watched him for a reaction, only to find stone. But inside, he was unraveling. Because this woman, the one deconstructing his empire in real time, was the same one who used to refill toner at 2 a.m., without being asked. She didn't smile when she ended the meeting. Didn't thank them for their time. She just closed the laptop and walked out. And the room exhaled like it had been holding its breath. Even the senior director leaned over and whispered, "Where the hell did Julian find her?" Damon didn't answer, because he knew exactly where she came from. She came from him. And now she was returning the favor, in heels. Layla didn't just execute strategy, she anticipated it. At first, the board assumed she was riding Julian's favor. But then she started calling out risk models before the analysts could present. Not guessing, knowing. When someone tried to undermine her during a Blackthorn quarterly forecast, she pulled up a buried audit on their screen in front of 20 people. It wasn't revenge, it was demonstration. of what happened when you underestimated her. She learned to wield silence like a blade, to respond with facts, not feelings, to let men talk themselves into corners, then walk them off the cliff with a single question. Even Julian started watching her differently, with respect and maybe something else. She walked into a system that had erased her once, and now it bowed in quiet acknowledgement. Even her former peers from Hale and Rowe avoided her gaze in the hallways, unsure whether to greet her or fear her. But Layla didn't flinch, didn't waver. She was no longer playing to survive, she was playing to win. And no one, not even Damon Hale, was going to stop her. The room was smaller this time. No press, no assistants, just 7 voting members of the Transition Oversight Committee, and Layla seated at the end, folder closed, unreadable. Julian led the meeting, calm and controlled. As we finalize the merger, we must now vote on the continuation or replacement of Hale and Rowe's executive leadership. Everyone knew what that meant. Damon Hale, he sat across from her, still, stoic, but his eyes never left hers. The motion was introduced. 2 votes to retain him. 2 against, 2 abstained, waiting for the deciding voice. All eyes turned to her. Julian didn't speak. Damon didn't move. Only Layla did, reaching slowly into her folder, sliding out a single page. A performance breakdown. A 3-year leadership analysis. A recommendation attached. Her recommendation. "The facts are here," she said, her voice cool and exact. Damon Hale built Hale and Rowe's foundation, but he also failed to modernize. His leadership is either a liability or a turning point. No one breathed. "I have not decided yet," she added. "I'll vote after the joint strategy dinner, after I've seen what he does next." Her voice was calm, but her eyes, they told him, "Your fate is in my hands now." The music had faded. The guests were gone. But Layla stayed, alone on the balcony, city lights shimmering beneath a moonlit sky. Damon found her there. He didn't speak at first, just stood beside her, shoulder to shoulder, the silence pulsing with everything they refused to say at work. "I shouldn't be here," she whispered. "So leave," he said. She didn't. He turned toward her. "You think I don't notice you?" Layla looked up. "I think you've trained yourself not to." That's when it happened. Not rushed, not accidental. His hand brushed, their fingers tangled. And then he kissed her. Slow, deep, every layer of restraint falling away in a single breath. But it didn't last. He pulled back too fast, jaw tight. "You're too good for this world," he said, voice graveled. "And too good for me." She stared at him, heart cracked open, breath caught. "You don't mean that," she said. "I do." And then he walked away. Left her standing in the night air, mascara smudged and chest hollow. She never told anyone, never looked back until now. And as she sat across from him in that boardroom, she wondered, had he meant it? Or was he just afraid? Scene: private strategy dinner, Michelin-starred restaurant, lower cellar lounge. The dinner was calculated elegance, glass walls, curated guest lists, whispered negotiations over butter-brushed wagyu. Layla sat beside Julian. Damon, 2 seats down, hadn't said more than 10 words all night, but she could feel him watching her like he was memorizing every move. When dessert was served, she excused herself. The wine cellar was downstairs, dimly lit, cool, and empty. Until she turned and found him there, blocking the exit, her breath caught. "We need to talk," he said. "No, Damon," she replied, cold and smooth. "We needed to talk 2 years ago." He stepped closer. "You're not the same," she raised a brow. "Neither are you." "I was wrong." She laughed once, sharp. "That's not enough." Silence crackled. Then he said it, low and raw. "I never stopped thinking about you." She didn't move, didn't flinch. But when he kissed her this time, there was no hesitation, no pulling back, no apology. His hand slid behind her neck, mouth finding hers with the urgency of every regret he'd buried. And she, despite everything, kissed him back, just once. Then pulled away, eyes sharp, lips parted, and said, "Too late, or not yet?" She didn't cry, didn't raise her voice, just placed the Cartier box gently on the marble counter. "I can't do this," Layla said, her voice calm. Julian stood across from her, glass in hand, expression unreadable. "You deserve someone who wants the life that comes with you," she added. His jaw tightened. And you don't? She looked him dead in the eye. I never did. Then she walked out, heels echoing through the quiet. No goodbye, no begging, just silence. But as the elevator doors closed, she knew. Julian Blackthorne was not a gave up quietly. Julian didn't react, not outwardly. But the second the elevator closed behind her, he poured the scotch down the sink and opened his encrypted file drive. Her exit wasn't a surprise. He'd seen the distance growing. The silence between their dinners, the way her eyes followed Damon when she thought no one noticed. He just hoped he could outrun it. Now? He'd contain it, control it. Because Layla wasn't just a woman, she was an asset, and Julian Blackthorne didn't lose assets. Especially not to men like Damon Hale. She barely had time to breathe. The night after she ended it, Layla arrived at the Blackthorne Gala out of obligation, not desire. She planned to keep it cordial, clean, quiet. Then Julian took the stage, the lights dimmed, the cameras turned, and she knew. He was about to make his move. And now, Julian said, lifting a champagne glass, I want to end this night by honoring the woman who's redefined what vision, grace, and brilliance look like. He turned to her, pulled the ring from his pocket. Gasps echoed across the ballroom. Layla Castillo, will you marry me? The spotlight hit her. Every eye followed. Her throat tightened. She couldn't say no, not without unraveling his empire and hers in one public blow. So she smiled and nodded once. Applause exploded. But her heart didn't move. By morning, her face was everywhere. Blackthorne's billionaire bride, finance's new power couple. News anchors speculated. Blogs dissected the ring. Staff at Blackthorne Capital smiled too widely in passing. She couldn't breathe. Julian hadn't asked her again in private, because he didn't need to. The photos did the work. The headlines sealed the illusion. And every minute she stayed silent, the lie cemented deeper. Backing out now would trigger a PR war. And Layla knew the only thing more dangerous than Julian's love was his humiliation. The file wasn't meant for him. It arrived misrouted, one of hundreds of documents in the transition shuffle. But the name stopped him cold. Mateo Castillo. He opened it. Pediatric ICU reports, years of treatments, insulin dependence, emergency readmissions, medical debt that would have crushed a family 10 times wealthier. He read each page, slower with every scan. Chemotherapy, uninsured months, payment declines. And in the billing notes, a wire transfer from Blackthorne Trust Holdings dated 3 days after Layla was terminated. Damon's chest tightened. She hadn't just lost her job, she'd nearly lost her brother. And he hadn't lifted a finger. He thought he'd fired a subordinate. He'd abandoned a woman at war with the universe. And she'd survived anyway. Without him, without anyone. And now, she was slipping away again. But this time, he wasn't sure if she'd ever let him close enough to stop it. Damon stared out the window of his penthouse, Manhattan glittering beneath him like a lie. He hadn't slept. The file still sat on his desk, its weight heavier than any annual report or shareholder lawsuit he'd ever faced. He remembered her last day. The rain, her silence, the way she looked at him like he wasn't worth one final word. He thought he was protecting the company. In reality, he was protecting himself from what he felt, from how much she mattered. And now she was gone, wearing another man's ring, smiling in photos that didn't touch her eyes. He poured a drink. Didn't touch it, because nothing numbed the truth. She needed help, and he turned away. She gave him everything, and he gave her nothing. And now he was watching the only woman he'd ever truly wanted become someone else's. Because of him. And maybe he didn't deserve her. But God, he wanted her back. The man across the desk slid the folder toward Damon. Anonymous leak came from an internal Blackthorne IP, he said. This memo confirms it. Damon flipped it open. A time-stamped email, attached photo, forwarded to a gossip columnist from a proxy account, then silently deleted. The original sender, Julian Blackthorne, and the timing? 48 hours before Layla's termination. Damon's jaw clenched. This wasn't a scandal, it was a strategy. Julian had orchestrated her fall just to catch her. And now Damon finally understood. He hadn't just lost her by accident, he'd been outplayed. The air shifted. Every meeting became a battlefield. Julian showered her with high-profile placements, exclusive press coverage, and hand-delivered gifts. The engagement sparkled on her finger like a shackle made of diamonds. Damon countered with silence, but precision. He backed her proposals publicly, defended her strategies to skeptical investors, elevated her voice in rooms that once ignored it. They both watched her, but for different reasons. Julian saw her as proof he could mold power. Damon saw her as the one thing he'd failed to protect and couldn't forget. She wasn't blind. She felt it in every glance, every word loaded with subtext. She was no longer the assistant caught in the middle. Now, she was the queen, and both kings were circling. But love wasn't enough anymore. Not after betrayal, not after him, not after survival. The envelope was unmarked, no sender, no note. Just her name, typed clean across the front. Inside, a single-page printout. An internal memo, / a forwarded email chain. Subject line, media opportunity, hail assistant photo. At the bottom, Julian's digital signature, dated 2 years ago. She read it once. Then again, her pulse didn't spike, her hands didn't shake, but something inside her, something buried beneath everything she'd rebuilt, snapped. She stared out the window, the city blinking like it always had. Except now, she wasn't sure who the real enemy was, but she knew she was done being played. The room buzzed with tension. Cameras set to roll, stakeholders flown in, glass pitchers sweating on mahogany tables. And then she walked in. Layla, hair slicked back, midnight black suit, no ring on her finger. Julian blinked once. Damon sat straighter. Everyone else shifted, unsure why she hadn't been announced on the agenda. She didn't sit. She stood at the front, alone, poised. "I'm calling for a vote," she said clearly, voice slicing through chatter. Effective immediately. Chairs squeaked, whispers sparked. Someone cleared their throat. Julian narrowed his eyes. Damon looked confused. "I'm invoking the contingency clause in our acquisition charter," she added. "I have the board's backing." People started pulling out folders, checking screens. The air tightened. She placed a single sheet of paper on the table. At the top, in bold, Leadership Reevaluation Motion filed by Interim Transition Director Layla Castillo. Damon stared at the document like it was written in another language. Interim Transition Director Layla Castillo. He flipped the page, checked the header, the legal signatures. It was real. Julian hadn't said a word. Of course not, because this was her move, not his. She stood calmly, watching the ripple of realization move through the room like a silent earthquake. The same room where she once served coffee now waited on her word. Damon looked up at her. She didn't glance his way, didn't blink. He remembered her in soft cardigans and quiet corners. Now she was commanding a vote with the weight of a corporate guillotine behind her. The woman he once broke had rebuilt herself into someone who could destroy him, with a clause in fine print he never saw coming. And all he could do was listen, because she'd earned that right. Layla placed the next document on the table. "The leaked photo from 2 years ago?" she said, voice level. It didn't come from a gossip column. It came from Blackthorn's servers. Gasps broke the silence. Executives glanced at each other. Julian's jaw locked. She turned to him, measured, controlled. "You leaked it. You knew it would cost me everything. And it worked." Julian said nothing. She faced the board now. Hale and Rowe has been a house of power hoarded by men too afraid to let it evolve. So today, I propose its leadership be dissolved, effective immediately. Murmurs. Shifting chairs. Shock. She continued, clear and steady. "This isn't about revenge, it's about control. Control taken from me and now reclaimed." She paused, letting the weight settle. "Every room I was shut out of, I now walk into as the one holding the key, and no one dared interrupt her." The room had gone still. Then Damon stood. No notes, no defense, just him. Unmasked for the first time in years. "I failed her," he said. Every eye turned. He looked only at Layla. She was the sharpest mind I ever worked with, and I let politics and cowardice erase her. Layla's expression didn't change. Damon kept going. "I didn't fight for you when it mattered. I told myself it was to protect the company. But really, I was protecting myself from you, from what I felt." Julian shifted, uncomfortable. But Damon didn't stop. You deserve better than silence. You deserve truth. And I gave you neither. His voice cracked. I can't undo what I did, but I won't pretend it didn't destroy something real. He stepped back, sat down, and said nothing else, because it wasn't his moment anymore. It was hers. Julian leaned forward slowly, lacing his fingers like a man still in control. Layla, he said smoothly, you've made your point. Impressive presentation, bold theatrics, but this isn't a TED Talk. This is a billion-dollar transition. The board stiffened. He smiled. You don't actually want to burn the house down, do you? You've worked too hard to light the match. Layla turned to him, unmoved, unshaken. I'm not burning it down, she said. I'm rebuilding it, without the rot. A flicker crossed his face. Just one. Then she slid the signboard petition forward, 8 signatures. Majority vote. It was done. I suggest you start packing your office, she added. A new era doesn't need old shadows. Julian stared at her. The man who had built empires just got outplayed by the girl he once tried to control, and Layla didn't blink. The final motion hit the table like thunder. Layla stood tall, voice unwavering. I'm dissolving the executive hierarchy. Effective today. The room erupted in gasps. Even Julian's composure slipped for a breath. She turned toward the projection screen as a new logo appeared behind her. Castillo Strategic. Beneath it, a new standard in global investment. I won't be CEO of Hale & Rowe, she said. I'll be CEO of what comes next. She looked directly at Damon, then Julian. You both shaped me, you both failed me, but you also taught me how to lead. Pause, and I don't need either of you do it. The silence that followed wasn't just respect. It was surrender. Because in that moment, the girl they dismissed had become the woman they answered to. No screaming, no revenge speech, just a quiet, surgical takeover. And the game was hers now. Julian waited by the window. Damon waited by the door, both silent, both watching her. But Layla didn't look at either of them. She gathered her documents, adjusted her blazer, checked her reflection in the dark glass, then turned to face them. You both had your chance, she said. Not just at love, but at respect. Julian opened his mouth. She held up a hand. You shaped my fire. Damon taught me silence. You taught me ambition. But I built this, alone. Damon took a step forward. So what now? She smiled faintly. Now, you watch. No dramatics, no tears. She walked between them. Neither man reached out. And maybe that was the point. Because power, once taken back, doesn't need permission to walk away. And Layla? She wasn't looking for love anymore. She was looking for legacy. The door opened. Layla re-entered the room alone. No ring, no escort, no apology. Executives stood instinctively, unsure whether out of respect or fear. She took the head seat, the one that used to belong to Damon, the one Julian had claimed in every meeting since. No one questioned it. She tapped the table once. Effective immediately, all comms, financial sign-offs, and global directives will flow through Castillo Strategic. No hesitation. The compliance officer nodded. Understood. A veteran partner cleared his throat. And what happens to Hale & Rowe? Layla folded her hands. It becomes a case study. Silence. Then, nods. Because they knew. The company they once ran no longer existed. Layla didn't need to raise her voice. She didn't gloat. She didn't punish. She replaced. The power wasn't just shifted, it was rewritten in her name. And they all saw it happen. Live. He caught her just as the elevator doors opened. Layla. She paused, back turned, shoulders squared. Damon stepped closer, suit jacket slightly undone, eyes burning with everything he hadn't said for years. I need to know, he said, voice low. Did you ever love me? The hallway felt frozen. She turned slightly, enough for him to see the glint of emotion behind her calm. He waited, 1 second, 2, 5. But she said nothing, just offered a faint smile, tragic, tired, unreadable, and stepped inside. The doors slid shut between them, leaving Damon with the question and the silence. Because sometimes the most powerful answer is no answer at all. 3 months later, Layla Castillo owned the skyline. Her name was on the door. Her face in Forbes. Castillo Strategic had just closed a $100 green tech fund. and the world had started paying attention. She moved like a storm in heels. No assistance, no noise. Every pitch deck crossed her desk. Every meeting started with her voice. She wasn't building empires for others anymore. She was building legacies for the ones who never got the chance. And every corner of her firm echoed one quiet truth. She wasn't chasing power anymore. She was the power. Matteo ran, not walked. Ran through the rooftop garden of his new rehab center, one funded by a quiet endowment from Castillo Strategic. Layla watched from a bench, coffee in hand, the sun warming her skin. He laughed, wind in his curls, ivy scars fading. She'd memorized every hospital beep, every midnight fever, every insurance denial. Now, she memorized the sound of his laughter instead. The nurse gave her a thumbs up. His latest scan was clean. Remission, they said. But to Layla, it felt more like resurrection. Because this time, when she looked at her brother, she saw a future again. It was waiting on her chair. No courier signature, no sender. Just a single red envelope, heavy cardstock, sealed in wax. Layla hesitated. Her staff had gone home. The city lights shimmered beyond the glass walls. She opened it slowly. Inside, no threat, just a folded note and something small tucked within. Her breath caught. She unfolded the letter. One sentence. No more meetings. Just one question. Taped beside it, a weathered loyalty card, half punched, from a tiny coffee shop 2 blocks from Hale and Row, the place where he always stood in line with her and never said a word. Back then it was always the same. He'd arrive at 7:12 a.m. black Americano, no cream. She'd be in line already, ordering green tea with honey, holding 2 laptops, pretending not to notice him behind her. But he always waited, always paid, never said more than, "You forgot breakfast again." And once, just once, she caught him watching her stir sugar like it was the most important thing in the world. Now, years later, that same coffee card sat in her palm. 10 punches. 1 left. His note, same place, 1 last drink. And for the first time in months, she let herself wonder. The bell over the door chimed softly. Same chipped tile. Same burnt espresso scent. Same jazz playing too low in the background. Layla stepped inside, coat draped over her arm, heels clicking across memory. The barista looked up, did a double take, then just nodded toward the corner booth. It was empty. Waiting. She sat without ordering. Outside, the city moved like it always did, impatient, unsentimental. But inside, time felt suspended. She traced her finger over the scar on the wooden table's edge. And for once, she wasn't thinking about power or profit. She was thinking about beginnings. The door opened. No announcement. No fanfare, just Damon. Same black coat, same steel gray eyes, but something in him had softened, like the weight he'd carried for years had finally cracked open. He spotted her instantly, paused, then walked over. No tie, no briefcase, no carefully rehearsed pitch. Just a man, no longer a king, returning to where he lost something priceless. He didn't sit immediately. She didn't invite him. But she didn't look away either. The silence between them was no longer sharp. It was waiting. And Damon, for the first time, he waited too. There was no ring on her finger, and no walls behind her eyes, not the ones she'd built to survive Julian. Not the ones Damon had helped construct, then left her buried beneath. She gestured quietly. He sat across from her. No one spoke. The air was warm, thick with unsaid things. Old pain, new space, mutual ache. She reached into her coat pocket and placed the loyalty card on the table, flat, final, symbolic. He looked down, then up, and for once neither of them reached to rewrite the past. They just sat with it, side by side, unspoken, undecided, still open. The barista called out 2 drinks, green tea with honey, black Americano. Layla stood, collected both, and returned to the table. She set his in front of him gently, like it was a test or a memory wrapped in foam. Damon looked at the cup, then at her. His voice caught in his throat, but before he could speak she did, softly, without sarcasm, without anger, just truth. "I ordered you a drink." Same as before. She met his eyes, calm, unwavering. "But this time, you say thank you." He did, and for the first time in years, she smiled.